This is Julie Pearson Little Thunder with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. Today is Thursday, September 20th, 2018, and I'm interviewing Dr. Pete Coser, an inductee to OSU's Diversity Hall of Fame this year. Dr. Coser, you're Muscogee-Creek. You received your doctorate in higher education from the University of Arkansas and founded a number of seminal Native programs here at OSU. You later served as president of the College of Muscogee Nation, among other positions, and you received numerous awards and honors, including induction into the Muscogee-Creek Hall of Fame. We'll be touching upon some of those highlights while focusing upon your career here at OSU. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Muscogee, Oklahoma, and that's where I was raised and raised in the community there, and went through the public school system in Muscogee, and I guess I have to say that I graduated from Muscogee High School in 1968, and I was born in 1950. So I was raised during the fabulous 50s, and kind of an exciting time then growing up in the 60s. But for Native people, it wasn't necessarily so. And so, in addition to being a part of the community, the mainstream community, our family was also part of the ceremonial life and the culture and the community of the Muscogee people. And of course, most Native people in whatever tribe across the United States have to kind of expound on our identities and our families and our community. And so my dad was George Coser, and my mother was Stella Coser. My dad was from Eufaula, and my mother was from Morris, which is near Old Muscogee. And there's, again, a story to that. We as Native people always have stories and connections that we have to make. But again, to talk about the community that I'm really from and my identity, and it starts right there. And I'm of the Fox clan, and I'm of the Casita tribal town, and that's my identity, and it's matrilineal in our world. And so my mother was of the Fox clan and of the Casita tribal town. And if I spoke about Casita and our origin, we would be here 3 to 5 hours. But I won't do that to you. But my dad, he was of the Raccoon clan, and he was of the Eufaula Canadian tribal town. That's how you pronounce it in English. And I'm pronouncing, of course, the communities that I come from both parents in English. But most of the time we address them in our own tribal language. So even now here in 2018, the Eufaula Canadian tribal town is becoming active. And so it's always a pleasure to go down to Eufaula and talk with my relatives on my dad's side. They've invited me to speak there, and my knowledge of what my dad had passed on to us, and so I shared that with them, and not too long ago. And my mother's tribal town, or my tribal town, is what we would consider inactive right now. So again, all of this identity and community would take quite a while, so I'll just maybe say just a few more things about it. But being raised in the community of Old Muscogee and the tribal community, and well, that makes me full-blood Muscogee, or full-blood Muscogee-Creek. And we have to look at the origin of the Creek people. And again, it's interesting for people like me and full bloods and those that identify with the community, because I was taught and raised about our identity and the origin of the native people. And so there's an origin of the Muscogee people. And most of the time, people look at my mother and my tribal town, that origin, as the origin of the Muscogee people. And then the Muscogee people of the Creek Nation, if you look at the history of the Creek Nation, it's confederacy. So it's made up of many small tribes. So really, my mother has a tribe, and then my dad has a tribe, and I have a tribe, but they're small tribes. But at once they were very large in the East. And again, I had the opportunity to visit in the East and be there at the location of the what we call the Casita tribal town. So it made me feel good to go back to Georgia around Macon and be there. It was just just being in that community. And for some reason, they thought I was some kind of authority. I said, no, I'm just from Oklahoma. I'm not here to take my land back or whatever. I'm just I want to visit our homelands. And so, again, that is somewhat a condensed version of my identity. And for Native people like me, it creates a dilemma. And as we move along, especially, I'm of the tribal town that I had mentioned, but my grandpa, he was also another tribe, and we identify with our grandpa's tribe on my mother's side, or Beacon, which is near Henrietta, on top of the hill at Henrietta. So all that area are the Arbica people, and then the Casita people are around that Morris area too. So it's at one time there was this land base and there was a ceremonial context there, and just the living context of a tribe were all here in Oklahoma at one time, and to a degree that they're still there, mostly with maybe a ceremonial ground, a community building, and its people. But again, it's created a dilemma for us because I believe that that we came from the earth. You have a lot of young native people and just general population that might read the history of our tribe and tribes across the nation and understand that some of the tribes they had a place of origin, and most times it's from the earth or from the sky or something to make that type of reference. But who believes in that? I'm one of those people, and probably my age and older, those that are still here that are in that age, and so when I mentioned about our tribe, we had an origin, we came from the earth, and there's a story that comes with that. And I never did read about our people until I was probably about 40 in that age range that I start to read about the Muscogee people, because I had been taught by our parents, and we were real little, and I tried to talk to my kids, but not like our parents did with us. They would set us down at a table like this, and we'll talk about our origin, our ancestry, our culture and community, and ceremonial life, and who were our relatives, and it becomes very important. And anyway, yeah, it creates a dilemma because I'm of the ceremonial life and to its current existence, again through my grandfather's uh, tribe. I belong to that as well, and my brothers, we all belong to that particular one, and we actively participated. Myself, probably 40-something years. So a large part of our life was the ceremonial life, but then also we were part of the traditional, what I would have to say, the traditional native church as well. And but even that's quite a story too, because it's not your typical church. They had, just like the ceremonial grounds, they had the rules and regulations of a Methodist church. That's hard to believe, but men sit on the left side and women sit on the right side, and there's a lot of rules and regulations. But to be a believer, again, it's probably a dilemma. You're a believer, then you're part of the ceremonial life, and in today's world, that's a no-no. And I've been asked many times, and so far as the Bible, I've really never have read it. I've read some of it, and but again, it does create that dilemma. But and I'm 68, so I'll get into a conversation and I'll ramble here and there, then I'll forget the original, or I was going to pass on to you. But again, I've been asked to speak to ministers and people of the church and express what I'm expressing right now. But my point basically is, as I remember it, is I'm satisfied with who I am. I'm satisfied with being a believer, than being a part of the ceremonial life, the traditional life. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's how we have to arrive at it. Or we're going to argue religion our whole lives, and we don't have time for that. So, we have to come to agreement within ourselves. And I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy with how I carry myself. I'm happy with who I am in this life. And so that's the dilemma, or people create that. And on one side they say there's no such thing as a parallel, or with native ways and the Christian world. There's no such thing as parallels, and you can't do this, you can't do this. On the other hand, at the ceremonial ground, they will say, love them. Mm-hmm. Even if they come against you, you love them. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty interesting. But that's my condensed version, short version of my identity in my life and where I was born and raised.
Well, thank you for that, and it answers a lot of questions that I wanted to ask. And of course, you're being raised bilingual too, and so I'm wondering, what was the attitude towards formal education in your household?
Well, in our household, going back to my mother and dad, I don't even want to say they were English was a second language for them. Philip Deere would say that it's the borrowed language. Mm-hmm. But my mother and dad, they were Muscogee people. They expressed everything in Creek. Mm-hmm. But to us, they left it up to the children to pick it up, whether they wanted to pick it up or not. Because again, the world at that time, and it doesn't seem to have changed much lately, but there's many thoughts on why maybe families aren't teaching their kids the language or to carry on the language, because we have so many English speakers now. And a lot of times, what's affecting the Muscogee people now, and I'm sure the other tribes too, is we're not having as many speakers to carry on the ceremonials or the cultural ways, because they have to be in that language. It's not made for English. And so, but in my mother's background, there's, we'll say schooling, for lack of better words, going back to that time. In my mother's family, my grandpa, and I have to define that even more. My grandpa, my mother's dad, he went to Kendall College. He started out at Kendall College, which is now the University of Tulsa. And now, how far he went, I don't know. And that's in all of our families and histories, and you hear things, and maybe it's never totally explained to you, but we were always told that he had a relationship to Kendall College. And my mother graduated from Chilocco Indian boarding school. And my dad, he really didn't complete a formal education. He didn't graduate. And I understand that of all the schools, I always remember he went to Seeger Indian School at Colony, Oklahoma, among the Cheyennes. And he said back then that they put the Creeks over there at Colony so they'd be among the Cheyenne people and other tribes, and so they wouldn't speak their language. And then they would send people from the West to be among the Creeks so they wouldn't speak their language or interact or try to continue any ceremonies. But, I have a little bit of information about Dad when he was at Colony and the photographs. We as Indian people, we kind of look out for each other. If we see a name, we received information about our parents or my dad at Colony. So that was kind of interesting to see the Cheyenne people and the other tribes that had come in. But, that was that effort to, to take the language away. And my mother and dad believed in education. Could they help me or my siblings? Basically, no. Again, they were Creek speakers, and they were still part of that generation that I believed in a lot of those cultural ways. And I always tease my wife, I'm glad she's not here, that I just miss that time, when they would pick your wife out for you. But, they wanted you to marry Creek. They didn't want you to marry any other tribe. They didn't want you to marry no white or any other color. They wanted you to marry Creek and to carry on the blood, to carry on the language, and to carry on the culture. And so that's what I'm saying. I was just at that point, what my dad used to say, so-and-so has some girls your age. I teach her, I have to look at them first. But we were, again, at that point of, continuing those old ways. Again, the language, it was up to us, and one of my brothers speaks well, and some of us, we use a combination of English and Creek, and my kids. I do what I can. Probably need to do more, but also, myself and my kids, they've all gone through all the Creek classes, and I was a little bit biased when I was here at Oklahoma State, and one of the reasons I created what's called the Muscogee language program here, the Muscogee language and culture class, and I think it still has 12 credit hours, and you can use it as an option for the foreign language requirement. So students that go to OSU, do not have to take a specific language. I mean, they can use Creek. But I had the opportunity to initiate that, develop that, and write the program for it. And it's still in existence, I believe. But part of that was my own kids, that I wanted them to participate. So I had 3 of my kids, they all went to OSU, graduated from OSU, and they were part of that language program. And actually, my youngest has a minor in Native American Studies. And so they were all able to take the Creek language, and they, they can, they have a good foundation in the language. They're not going to carry on a conversation, but they have a good foundation of the language, what it's about, and can express themselves when they have to, or they know what's happening. And so, again, when I developed that program, there was a thought in mind.
Little self-interest there.
Right, self-interest that maybe my kids would take that.
Benefit.
But then I was surprised that there haven't been other languages incorporated. People would come to me, when are you going to start? This particular. Well, hey, I'm not a part of the language department, and I just part of student affairs and into academia as well. And this was something that I was interested in. It was a part of our department, and collaboration with the language department,
and it was the first step because we hadn't had a native language taught.
Right, exactly. See, and it's some of the things that I'm sure we'll get into later. When I first came to Oklahoma State in '85, I did my own assessment, and to use a term that was kind of getting older now, and that was best practices. I was looking at best practices of other institutions here in Oklahoma and outside of Oklahoma. I had the opportunity to be involved in a national movement and here in the state of Oklahoma. And so I had a good idea of what we needed here at OSU. And so one of those was the language program, and it's still in existence. And again, I wasn't part of the language department, but a collaborative effort. Must have been pretty solid because it still continues, and students have the option of taking that as an option for the foreign language requirement.
Now, did you always you're going to school in this small town, Muscogee. Did you always know did you know by high school, what are you thinking in terms of higher education by the time you get to high school? What are your interests?
I did not have a good experience as a part of the elementary, junior high, and high school, those experiences. And was that my fault? I'm sure partly it was my fault. And it was just the time too, during the 50s and 60s. Diversity wasn't, that was a dirty word. I think it's still a dirty word. And so there was no such thing as helping Native kids. And it's kind of interesting. People go, well, we had Johnstown Valley, we had some of these programs. Well, you know why Johnstown Valley some of these programs were initiated? No, to help Indian kids. That's true, but we had, the federal government had to come in and help these districts, not necessarily help them, but help the Native kids be recognized, that they, needed some attention, and the schools weren't going to give it to them and not have them as a part of their system. And so anyway, that's that thought.
So that really shaped by the time you're deciding to go to college, and where do you go to undergrad?
Oh, okay. Again, I lose these thoughts along, but that's why I talk too much, and then I lose my train of thought. But I wasn't a very good student. Again, when I would talk to my dad, my dad was a real smart man. He could speak the Creek language. He explained the ceremonial life to me and explained Creek life. And my mother was the same way, but somehow, my mother was connected with the Methodist Church as well, in addition to the ceremonial life of the cultural community. And she had a little more experience at it, but I don't believe there's enough to help shape us or the importance of what we were going through. Although, they knew the importance and are helping us along, but to provide that guidance that we needed. We needed additional guidance, so we didn't receive that. And so by the time I got to high school, I finally realized I'm going to be out of here. What am I going to do? And my uncle, my mother's brother, he was a Marine, a decorated Marine, and he was what's called a Carlson's Raiders. He was a part of that, which is the first form of that type of special forces. That's part of the United States Armed Services. That was the first form of that. So I thought, well, I'll join the Marines. Vietnam was going on, and servicemen and women are to be supported. But Vietnam, we used to check the Sunday paper and see who was gone. Mm-hmm. That was every weekend because they were dying right and left. And so my parents didn't want me to join the service. And so a couple of my siblings had gone to high school. And so in Lawrence, Kansas with a puppy. And so that was my thought, well, I'll go to high school. And I played football in high school too, junior high and high school. And I tried hard, but I'm about the size I am now playing football. But, I had the opportunity to go play at high school. And coaches were looking for me to come there. I had met with them, and they were looking for me to come there. But then, of all things, my classmates, they were doing this and doing that and getting ready. They were taking the ACT. I said, well, I'll take that. And they were applying to colleges. Well, I'll do that too. And so my classmates, and we had our 50th high school reunion a couple of weekends ago, but I was unable to go. Oh. But they didn't realize how much influence they were on me at the time. I just did what they did. Right. But along the way, when I was in high school, we used to go down to Lake Texoma. And they had a Methodist camp there, and I would pass Southeastern State College back then at Durant. And so I said, I'm going to go there. And so, again, I just followed what everyone was doing. And some, the Native kids, or a teacher or two, they didn't provide much help, but they said, you need to apply to the BIA back then for funding. And so I did all that. So I was just doing what everyone else was doing, and so again, that was the start. And I had noticed Southeastern, and I had noticed NEO, and I had noticed Connors. And then in Okmulgee, there was OSU Okmulgee at the time, but they weren't, associate degree granting or baccalaureate back then. So, I didn't want to go to a technical type of institution, and then high school was that as well. And so I think that's kind of what drew me away from that. And
towards Southeastern.
And the Southeastern are these two schools over here. So, and it was interesting. And again, all the kids that I worked here with here at OSU, I could see them in how I was at a certain time. Some that I worked with here at OSU knew absolutely nothing. And then some came from homes where you had to explain everything. And that's kind of the home that I came from. You had to explain everything to me. That's where, I guess that's where I learned a lot of patience growing up as a native person. My dad, he was a Creek speaker. He used to, a lot of people didn't have confidence in him because they said he couldn't read, he couldn't write, he couldn't spell. But anyway, I'm losing my train of thought again. But
did you end up at Southeastern?
Oh, okay.
You're applying to all these a couple of schools.
I applied again. Check the ACT.
Right.
You indicate where you want to score set.
Good.
And so, and along the way, I thought, even to this day, I said, did I apply to Southeastern or did I apply to India? Did I apply to Carson? I must have.
Okay.
I must have. Because people were saying, what kind of, they started bragging about their ACTs and they were getting into these schools and everything. For OSU, that was, and I'll talk about this later, that was impossible. That would be an impossible dream. OSU was just way off the grid, way off the chart, just not even thought of OU the same way. So from NEO, I got this big package.
Okay.
I kind of said, what in the world was all this stuff? So what did I do with it? Connors, I got a big package. What did I do with it? Put it on the side. Southeastern, I got one letter and one page. It says you've been accepted to Southeastern. That's what I was waiting for.
That's what you needed.
That's all I needed. And it started the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of interesting. Then, I went down to, I think my parents, they took me down to the camp down there at Lake Texoma. Then when we were coming back, then I went to enroll. It took me all day long. Of course, they didn't, back then they didn't have what they have now. Mm-hmm. And so far as, efficiency, so far as enrollment. So you had to walk here and walk there, get everyone's signature. Just kind of like when professors miss the deadline. You got to get everybody's signature back then. So it took me all day long. And of all things, they enrolled me in 18 hours. And my mother was with me, but she didn't understand, but at least she was with me. And all I knew was go to the registrar's office. So I started there. But it took us all day long. And I was enrolled. And 18 hours, and I didn't know what that meant. And they said, what they enroll you in, Pete? I said, I've got a pretty good schedule. They enrolled me in biology, modern Western civilization and stuff. Yeah, I said, sound like a pretty good schedule. So yeah, I thought modern Western civilization. I thought I was going to learn about cowboys and Indians, and of course I was sadly mistaken. And so, kind of in short, the 4 years at Southeastern, I completed those, and just like any other student, had a rough time there making that transition, and made the transition. And on the way, I got married about my junior year, and of course, Southeastern is among the Choctaw people, so my wife's Choctaw, and so no one said anything, but it's always when you marry another tribe, that's not our tribe, but things have started to change a little bit because and we jam back and forth. Our ceremonial ground or our tribal town was active up till World War II, and my mother said after the war was over, then what happened? There was a transition because men and women had gone to all parts of the world, and they had seen the big cities, and so what the native community started to lose some of its members because now they were becoming a little bit more mobile because of the knowledge they had gained and the access to, it sounds funny, but access to the automobile and stuff like that. And so, and again, things, I don't want to say change, they progress along the way, but my dad, they're very knowledgeable about our Creek ways and native ways. He says our Creek ways never change. And a lot of Creek people can't understand that, and other native people, some people. And of course, in the mainstream, if you're a good leader or, if you're accepting of change, and, they say good change, but it's interesting. I saw an article the other day, but I hope I remember about that article, but my dad said, our way, if things are lost, you leave them alone. And of course, in the mainstream or some other tribes, there's some young native people that say, no, we have to bring it back. I said, no, you leave it alone. And this is where people don't quite understand. They said, they'll hurt you. It'll hurt you if you don't know the language, if you don't know the context, if you don't know the culture of it. So it can hurt you more than anything else. So leave it alone. Whatever you have is what you work with. And I talk about that too among a lot of people, and they don't find favor with that. But I saw this article the other day. I don't know if it's federal legislation or just native people or an organization that have their own legislation or their own group, and have been talking about cultural abuse. I found that kind of interesting. And I was looking at their definition of cultural abuse, and what they were saying was opposite of the teachings of the traditional world. I mean, I said, man, that is interesting. I know that they're trying to protect our tribes and cultures from people that don't understand, but they don't even understand. What they're doing is going against the way things are supposed to be, and they just don't understand. So
you may have to talk to them, write a little response.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I don't know. They say elders are They'll speak to the elders, but people don't do that. They're in the way. They don't use them properly. And I don't want to call myself an elder, but being older now, I can see where the people are totally wrong. They should be talking to the older folks about different things. Living in this mainstream, working in this mainstream, and some of those ways that belong to our communities and tribes and their thoughts. But they're just pushed aside. Everything's just like walking over here, everybody's passing me. So man, that's the world. They think they got the world by the tail, when it's really just about living and dying.
So you're married now. You're going to do some undergraduate work, and you do that where? Where do you do your undergraduate? I mean, your graduate work, your MA.
Okay. Well, I was trying to be a teacher.
Okay.
And I have many areas that I can work in. I've worked in social studies, health and physical education, even art. And it's been something good for my life that I had choices. Here's this choice. But I've got to pick one or two, and I've got to leave the others alone. When I'm just as good, I do well at this, well at this, but I've got to pick something because I've got to focus on what I need to do. So, anyway, my first teaching job was in Dallas. Well, that was an experience too, living in the big city of Dallas, and life was just interesting. And when I say these things, people don't believe them, what I say. But when I was in my undergrad work, we were raised during the time of segregation during the 50s. And the whites were on this side, the blacks were on this side, the Native people that live in those communities were just kind of thrown into the mainstream, and you could exist wherever you wanted to exist, among the African Americans or among the mainstream of the white folks. And so I saw stuff for the very first time when I was in Dallas, and just a young man trying to ride the transit system in Dallas to get to the other side of Dallas. I got on the bus. The bus was totally Hispanic. And that was cultural shock for me. And one time when I did move, and these are, would affect the society and the world and your growth and everything. When it's segregated, everyone has a role. And then when I went to college, I saw some people for the first time not in that role. I couldn't believe it. Different roles. I could not absolutely believe it. So those are all my growing experiences.
Good diversity.
Yeah, and so again, I got that undergraduate degree, but then I worked 1 year, then came back to Southeastern and got my master's.
Okay.
And
in what was the master's in?
Let's see. I think I got an MED, and I think the focus was still, I think it was art and psychology. Mm-hmm. So I started to change a little bit. Okay. I started getting into a different area as well.
Now, when you get to the University of Arkansas for your doctorate, are you thinking about Native pedagogy yet? Is that even on the horizon?
No, not really.
Okay,
It was a matter of survival,
okay,
and so even that is interesting. Again, our life's experience, to experience segregation, to experience the growth of diversity, even in your own community, going from a very small community to a place like Dallas,
right.
and so your growth continues. And at one point, I thought, why am I not working with Native people? And that was probably the early 70s when that came to my mind. And I must have, there was quite a, going from a master's to the doctoral program at the University of Arkansas. There was quite a lapse of time there, but after I received my master's, and then I started, getting interested in serving Native people and pedagogy and researching the growth and development of Native people and Native education. So it started kind of like when Title IV initiated itself. And people were telling me about that. And what in the world is this Title IV thing? And Johnson O'Malley is interesting too, because Johnson O'Malley, I was going to look at the date that it really began. That's around 1950, during that time.
Yeah.
But what my wife says the same thing. If Johnson O'Malley's been around that length of time, we weren't involved in. We were given no services. And as I experienced it, things would go into the general fund, and
Native
so
parents
we'll service
right.
everybody.
That's right.
Yeah, that was the school district, and that's how they dealt with that. So, but so a lot of us again were limited so far as our experiences in Native education, because it wasn't brought to the surface for us. And I was thinking about my experiences in Muscogee and Southeastern, and I experienced a student association in college. Experienced maybe someone that was to help Native kids, but my K through 12, that was non-existent. So, but again, my interest began, and so I think I just worked 1 year after my master's and moved back to Muscogee and Tulsa, and started working with Native programs.
Okay.
That's when I really started learning a lot. And
through Indian Health Service,
well,
or was it through the public schools?
Well, it was. All the titles have different sections, and I worked with a title for, I think, Section C.
Okay.
And an organization, and so I became involved in I'm trying to think of what type of school that is, what kind of model, not a charter, but something very similar to the beginning of that. But we focused on math, and I believe it was, one was Native American Studies, math, and maybe English and Native American Studies in Tulsa. We would draw those kids out and bring them to our school at the time and work with them. Those were the ones having difficulty in the Tulsa public schools, and those that were interested. So, and I taught Native American Studies, and thereafter I had the opportunity to manage that program as well. But again, that's kind of where it's
foundation.
yeah, and ever since I had the opportunity to meet a lot of good people and Native people. We're all retired now, but they laid the foundation for all of it. For tribal colleges, all the programs that are out there now, and so it's just a blessing to be able. Sometimes I would go into a room with all these outstanding educators. Sometimes wonder, what am I doing here? But when I would represent Oklahoma, when I would represent an institution, that's kind of interesting too, because you get into intertribalism.
Right. It was an exciting.
So I'm from Oklahoma, and in some places that don't mean a whole lot.
Right.
And so we don't have to express ourselves. So I just grab that microphone and just take off. And sometimes they hold it back from. So again, it's just been just interesting. But early '70s, that's when again my interest in Native education started. There was not necessarily a beginning, but a beginning, and my growth and all of that, and all the way to the when I went to the University of Arkansas. With that.
So, Dr. Coser, you've got this foundation now. This interest in Native education. You've been doing it for a while, and you're looking at a graduate degree on the level of a doctorate, and you choose the University of Arkansas. Why did you choose the University of Arkansas?
Well, I was working with the Telequal public schools at the time. And Fayetteville and the University of Arkansas was just 45 minutes away. And yeah, I was impressed with the University of Arkansas. And I thought about OSU. I said, man, OSU's quite a ways now, from Telequal.
Still too far.
And I said, OU's quite a ways as well. So University of Arkansas was just right here. And I, so far as departments and admissions and training, and I believe in the Oklahoma schools. I believe in OSU and TU, and I'll put OU last. I'm just teasing. But I believe in academic training and education here in Oklahoma, and I believed in the University of Arkansas too. And but mostly because it was closest at the time, and I just asked my wife to support the thought of me trying to get back into school. And so what I did was applied to the University of Arkansas in the Higher Education Administration Department. And at the same time, then I also applied for a fellowship with the Department of Education. And I think it wasn't no longer Title IV, and I don't know if it was Title VII, but it was those types of funds. And so to me, the only way that I could go to work on a doctoral program, I wanted to go full time, and I wanted to be able to support attending the University of Arkansas and also support my family. So, and I applied for a fellowship, And again, I was an administrator with the Telequa Public Schools and director of the Johnson Miller program, and director of the Title VII program, I believe. It might have still been Title IV. But it was one of the largest Indian Ed programs in Oklahoma. But I just, one of the goals was always to get a doctoral degree. And so I just asked my wife about the idea, and that was my goal. I said, I'm just going to try. And if I don't make it, then I'll get back to doing what I'm doing. And Telequa, they were real supportive of what I was doing there. And I looked at some, longevity there. But, I thought, well, the only reason I would leave would be the opportunity to work on a doctoral program. So I applied to the University of Arkansas. I applied to the Department of Education, Indian Education section. And the reason I have to tell you this is because that's a part of the experience. The real, of course, working with my daughter now and son, I talk about them. You have to take everything, a step at a time. Whenever you're working on your graduate degree or that final degree. So I started getting calls from colleagues throughout Oklahoma who had all applied for that same fellowship program, two-year fellowship program. And some outstanding Indian educators in Oklahoma. And they said, Pete, I got my slip today, I was rejected. He said, how about you? I said, well, I haven't received anything yet. And so by that time, I started getting into the admissions process at the University of Arkansas. And applied to graduate college, got accepted. But the biggest part was applying to the department and getting accepted to the department. And so as a full-time student or just a provisional student or whatever. So I went through several interviews, and the most difficult interview I went through was all the graduate education programs. I had to speak before all the department heads. And so they rated me over the coals pretty good. So, I spoke and did the best I could. They asked some hard questions and questions I can't say in this interview. But, I let them know that I did the best I could. And ready to meet their challenge, or I would challenge them too. And so, but again, along the way, the Indian educators here in Oklahoma that had applied, they were still calling me. I said, no, I still haven't heard anything. They said, well, I got my rejection slip. So I was in D.C. and I had to, I forget, for whatever reason, so I went by the Department of Education, the Indian Education section. So, well, since I'm here, I'll just go by and check. So I went in, and I met the lady who was in charge. Oh, yes, we have your application. You're still being considered. And so, I left. I thought, well, it was good, and I met her and talked with her. I thought it was positive.
That was good timing.
Yeah, and I still didn't find anything out. And so through all of that, my wife and my oldest daughter and then my son, he was just a little boy. And so we were there at Arkansas was my final interview, the one I'm talking about now. He said, well, how'd you do? I said, well, I don't think I made it. And I said, it was tough. And I said, it's not like an undergrad or grad, some of your master's program. Just sign on the line and you're in. Doctor program, they have to want you. And you have to have the maturity to stay in. And so I said, I accept that. So I said, I don't know yet. So I'm supposed to go back and meet with them. And let's just go home. I don't want to go back. And, my wife said, what your dad said, you always have to meet the challenge of whatever it is. You finish something. I said, okay. So I went back and I met with a major professor in higher education administration. He says, we'd like to have you as part of our program. But
you almost
I almost hit the roof. Because, again, it was a real tough interview. And, he explained, we're going to admit you, or you've been accepted. Here's what we thought about your interview, and here's some things we'd like for you to improve on. So are you willing to do that? I said, yeah, I'm willing to do that. And so I became a part of that program. I said, but as part of getting the fellowship, you had to be accepted. That was what I needed. I needed to be accepted into the department's program. And about that time, I said, well, I thought I was thinking, well, if I receive the fellowship, good, but if not, then I'll try to work it out where I can stay in the program. So anyway, I still hadn't heard from Washington. It was getting close to, where school began. So I just called up there again. I called her up, and I don't know if she remembered me or not. And I said, I'd like to check on, my application, see where I am. And okay, I'll check. So she fumbled around, came back. Miss Coser, we've accepted you as part of the fellowship. Again, I'd like to hit the roof. And
wonderful honor.
But it was an $18,000 fellowship at the time. It covered everything.
That covered a lot.
And plus, I was getting a stipend. I got everything paid for, and then I got a stipend on top of that. And my wife was willing to work as well. So it worked out. And it was just kind of interesting too about that, the doctoral level. Especially among Native people. I have to tell a story about them too, because we have a lot of Native people talk about that, especially during the time that I was admitted. But now, we have the young ones, they've met the challenge, so that's a whole other story too about the readiness of Native children and students now. Back then, well, Pete, I'm going to work on my doctorate too. And I said, fine. And some, really adamant, if you can do it, I can do it. And I said, that's right. If you meet the challenge, you can certainly do it. But, nothing happened, And so when I speak, I'm very candid with Native people. I said, don't tell me you want to get a doctorate degree, not unless you're willing to take the risk. I risked giving up an administrator's job with the Tonopah schools. And I took my kids out of the school system, and I moved my wife, and she's willing to work and help out. And so we all took a risk for me to do this. You have to be willing to do it. If you're not, you can probably forget it. And, you have to, the risk with the programs too, you have to be
Right.
mature, and that's what I usually promote to native students. You have to be mature in these programs. And same way here at OSU, the University of Arkansas, they stress that they look at our maturity level at the end of each semester, whether we would continue or not. So, but it's kind of interesting too, because the 1950s and the 1960s would follow me all the way to my doctoral program. And it's kind of interesting. I shock people when I say this. And I don't even know how many credit hours I have, maybe 230, 40, 50. And I've never had a course in algebra in my whole life.
You managed to slip through without.
No, they would not give it to me.
Oh. Wow.
And that was the system at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I took some practical math. And then again, I saw the likes of what everyone was doing. And so I said, I want to take an algebra course at least before I take the ACT. And so I applied, the schedule, and throughout the school year, I would see older students, in different classes. So I got my new schedule for that year. And so I thought, well, I'm ready to go to the algebra class. But there was a big X across it, so they wouldn't allow it. And that one particular practical math course, you could take that and then move on to algebra. But it was so easy for me. I don't know if they could say it was so easy for me that I just didn't. It was a waste of time for me.
Right.
But I knew that I realized I needed to.
Right.
I should have gotten the best grade out of that class. And then they announced the kids that we'd been moving on to algebra from the practical math. And I was waiting for my name. I said, well, just wait, get my name called and I'll move on. They never did call my name.
Because you were Muscogee-Creek. Because you were.
No, because I guess they thought I was a weak student.
This is in Milwaukee.
Right, and again, after all these years, I've never had a course in algebra. And did I ever need it? Well, I would have needed it for the ACT. And,
Yes.
I had to take so many hours of statistics, about 12 hours of statistics.
Right.
And so that's why I said it followed me all the way
Yes.
to my doctoral program.
Yes.
And my daughter Ashley, that's the difference between Ashley and myself. I had to work hard Ashley worked hard. I was trying to survive with the training that I had.
Right.
Ashley can teach statistics. I was just trying to survive.
Yes.
I had to take one course twice in order for it to be acceptable.
Right.
And so that's. But at the University of Arkansas, I enjoyed the experience. Yeah, I got a fellowship, been accepted at the University of Arkansas, and I was in the doctoral program. I didn't see any native people. I was by myself. And so, but I got connected with like minority affairs there, and a lady by the name of Dr. Dolores Brookins, who has since passed away, became my mentor there. And so I went to a lot of the activities that they had, and then and she asked me about activities for Native students. I said, I really don't have time right now, but let me get to a certain point in my program, then I'll get back with you. I think after I got through all the coursework. So it freed me up a little bit, so I went back to her. So, we just did different things. I started the NAS powwow at the University of Arkansas.
I was going to say, you
twice. And then I brought back the Native American Student Association. But, they asked me to be president. I said, no, I want the undergrads to be the officers. And so we brought in the Native American Heritage Week. And so it was just, again, I enjoyed my time because I had time to help out there. And Dr. Brooklyn, she really helped me out. And I really appreciate it. At that time, through that office, I was able to be recognized.
So you're making changes even while you're there as
Right,
a doctoral student.
So, and there's one program there that I initiated and implemented here, but it was an operation for a while, but I think they backed off because of the state level, revisiting affirmative action, revisiting, these types of, legislation and the schools. So when I was at the University of Arkansas, I did a couple of internships. One at the financial aid office, one at admissions, and the sociology professor. He came to me and we became good friends. And he said, Pete, let's do and this is something for OSU. If you're listening to OSU, at the University of Arkansas, they still have their out-of-state tuition fee waiver program for Native Americans. I believe it's still in operation, and I helped start that. And so I think it's still in operation now. If you belong, if you're a member of the Osage tribe or member of the Cherokee tribe or Cherokee Nation, you get your out-of-state portion waived. And as though you were a resident.
That's great.
And I started that here at OSU. And it was an operation for a few years. And that's another dilemma. It's not change, but when you're progressive and want things to happen, I brought this program to OSU, initiated, got it implemented, and it served a lot of students. I don't think it's in operation anymore. But was that easy? No, it was not easy. People did not think it was worthy of to be a part of OSU. But I accepted that challenge that it was. And one administrator admitted to me years later that was one of the best programs we ever had.
That's a compliment.
And so, but the changes do happen. But anyway, that carried over from Arkansas.
You mentioned that you did this needs assessment before you came here. So was that part of it? You're thinking to yourself, I guess, before you get on the OSU campus, you've kind of looked at this situation and coming in what some things are that you want to work on. So one was the tuition waiver.
Right. Yeah, that was one.
What was another one?
Well, there were several. And when I came to OSU, OSU, Oklahoma State, to me, it's the institution here in Oklahoma. And so, as a young doctoral person, I could have gone somewhere else, out of state.
Mm-hmm.
But I accepted the position here, and based on a lot of things, people ask, well, why did you do that? Because you know, they gave you more consideration out of state. I said, well, OSU is OSU. And I've always wanted to be there. Plus my mother and dad, they were still alive, but 1985, how long ago was that? It's about 33 years ago, they were still alive. And he passed away just as soon as I started here, about a couple months later. But again, in my growth and from the early 70s to where I was when I came over here, there's some things I felt needed to be in place here at OSU. When I talk about an assessment, again, best practices and talking with students, talking with faculty, and talking about Native education. And Howard Shipp, who was one of the first Hall of Fame persons, I always remember what he said. He says, Pete, when you come to the table, you talk about diversity, whether they want to hear you or not. And so, through that type of assessment, I felt OSU was just really lagging behind. And so...
there was no Native American Staff or Faculty Association before you got here.
And that was the one thing I felt we needed, a Native American Faculty and Staff Association. That was initially for the faculty. Then I was going to try to come back and maybe do the staff, but then I think I included just both. Mm-hmm. And so we started meeting on a regular basis and able to start generating scholarships for students. And OSU knew that the system knew this was in place. Mm-hmm. So we were ask our opinions, or people would come and talk to us, but it was something that was established. We would look at our students, what's happening on campus with our students, what's happening in academia, what's in student affairs, and just what's happening on campus. So I felt there was a need for that. So that's how that happened. Mm-hmm. And then along the way, I felt we needed an American Indian Alumni Association. And so I wrote that program up, and I worked real well with Jerry Gill, and I forget his name, the person that was Larry Shell. I think I mostly worked with Larry Shell. And then later on, he became the director of the Alumni Association. So, we worked that out real well, and it continues. And they have they honor an American Indian alumni person. They recognize them at the football game, and so that's still a part, of OSU, and then again, I brought this out-of-state tuition fee waiver program, and that was to generate out-of-state students. That was to generate, to help them, help the students that were coming from out of state, helping with the cost of attending OSU. And there was just things, even the lacrosse program, my son, we reactivated the lacrosse program. Now, we got into league play, and I think it's still functioning now. Mm-hmm. But, we got into league play and kind of got rid of the old mentality of club lacrosse and that kind of thing. And so, again, there were some other items that I fashioned an American Indian Big 12 student leadership conference after the Afro-Am.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I wrote that program up, and it's, again, once you leave, people have however they want to deal with it, they deal with it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be there when you come back. But
Right.
I was so excited about that program because our students got the opportunity to meet and to visit. And we went down to OU, we went to Nebraska, we went to Kansas State, we went to KU, we went to University of Missouri, and the Big 12. There was the institutions had to recognize their native students.
Right.
Because we got a little bit of some kids maybe from Texas Tech and Baylor, and so they were we had this group. So after I left, I don't know if that was their intent or not, but they formed this Oklahoma higher education program, and so the Big 12 for American Indians went by the wayside. Well, to me, what they should have done is just kept that and just developed their own Oklahoma.
Right.
But there are some things at the state level that we had. We had it takes a lot of leadership when you develop programs, and we had we used to tease each other. We started the state institution for faculty and staff at the state level. So we started meeting, and it started here at OSU. And the acronym was OOHRP. Oklahoma Higher Education, whatever. So it was OOHRP. And so, but we were going for it. We met at Murray State, we met at OU, met here, and we started meeting at different institutions throughout Oklahoma, and it fell by the wayside. Some
good networking while it was
going on. Exactly. It was just we were kind of connected with state leaders and becoming influential, and even started a connection with the Sovereignty Symposium. We were just starting to get connected with them. They were wanting our representation there and stuff, but it fell by the wayside. That was one of which would have continued. But again, I don't have my notes for him. There's some other things that I felt that we needed here.
Well, I think we'll wrap up here, but I did want to ask you, when it's hard, when you're bringing these programs, when you're writing these programs, and there is resistance, a little bit of resistance, and like you said, you bring diversity to the table, and then you stay at the table. How did you move the ball forward?
Well, and that's a good point. That's probably the best point. I'll probably make reference to this during the banquet, that in order to be progressive, I don't want to say change, in order to be progressive and recognize the different populations, to recognize the Native American population, we have to have the leadership that to support what we do. And Dr. John Campbell was here at the time, and he was very supportive. And some of our efforts, James Halligan was very supportive. And I would get support from other people as well. And I try to think of the former president from the 60s, Dr. Robert Kahn. He was one of my supporters. He'd send me messages, to motivate me and stuff. And so, but it takes that type of leadership. And some of the programs that we had or that I implemented, I would go to key administrators to help make them work. And they said, no, I don't want that. And well, okay, well, I'll mention that to the administrators that want to see this move. And so things started moving a little bit quicker then, because but why would I want to do that? Why would I want to do all this? And I mentioned that to young Native people now. And young Native people are among the old folks, the elders of the old community. They would say, you don't ever say I or put yourself in the middle. And that's what we're seeing now. And I spoke one time to a banquet, and it was over there at the foundation building over there. And one administrator mentioned about passion. I spoke a lot of passion. And but I want to say that comes from the 50s and 60s, when you don't have anything, when you're not allowed to do something, when you're not supported, when people do not believe in your community and do not believe in you. And when I got to Oklahoma State, that's what I carried with me. And so, the younger people, it is good, they continue, and maybe they weren't with us at the time, when we were not allowed to move in this direction or that direction, and not supported. So I brought that passion with me to OSU. I said, we need to have certain things in place for the faculty and staff, and especially the students, and especially OSU. And to make the OSU the leader in Native education here in the state of Oklahoma. So, and some people say, well, you're part of that growth here at OSU. But we started experiencing 200 up to almost 300 freshman classes so far as Native Americans alone each year, to where, we equal the percentage of, we'll say 9% of the state of Oklahoma being Native American, and we reached that point at OSU. And so, and this was all, again, when we were here and when I was here. But again, to that passion was, I really didn't create that passion. The system created that passion. And so, but I carried that with me to OSU. And so, but this land here, and this is a part of that, of the Creek class too. We're sitting on Creek land. People don't realize that. We're sitting on Creek land. And I felt and believed in OSU has a responsibility to the Native people. Not that Native people have a responsibility to OSU. OSU needs to initiate programs. And that's, I'm OSU, I was OSU, and I initiated it. And I got the support of key people here at OSU. And that's why we still have some of these programs that are still in existence. And it's created this excitement about OSU. But again, I believe in OSU being responsible for Native students and the Native communities, not the reversal.
Well, OSU a great debt. And I have one last question,
Okay.
which is, how do you maintain your OSU connections?
Well, that's interesting. Again, hopefully I don't forget what I'm about to say. But now about OSU, some people say, Pete, was that always a goal for you? Or what are your goals in life? Was it your goal to work for OSU? And I always tease him, even for the public. I said, I'm not going to break out in a song here, but working at OSU and my kids going to OSU, and my family going to OSU, especially me working at OSU, was an impossible dream. Impossible dream. And I said, most of you are just hearing that. You don't understand that, what I'm just now saying. That was an impossible dream from where I came. And my wife graduated from OSU. My oldest daughter graduated from OSU. My son graduated from OSU. My daughter just recently, she completed all the requirements. She was Dr. Coser, another Dr. Coser, PhD in clinical psychology, and graduate of OSU 3 or 4 times, in fact. And then my late son-in-law, he was a graduate of OSU, and he was an OSU. He's an OU fan, and so we have all these OSU, just part of our family. And I love working here at OSU, and we got to have students that support each other and support. I felt strong because the students supported me, and they say, "We want to stand with." I said, "No, not this time." I said, "I have to do this." Some of the items say I need to get done. It was just me that needed to do it, and so again. The students were very helpful in doing what we had to do and what needed to be implemented. But again, that's the connection with OSU. And right now, I'm retired, but I'm on the Bacone Board of Trustees. We're trying to get Bacone on solid grounding there, and then I'm on the advisory board here at OSU in the psychology department, and then an advisory board for the Creek Nation and their foundation, which I started there, initiated that. So anyway, and my son and I, we love OSU football and basketball, so we keep that connection up. And it was just a good experience, great experience. But time does move on. Even though kids about run over me to this morning, but that's progress, not change.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the connection. Something that I thought would be impossible.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.